A sloth, a donkey, and a curious human. Send a prompt and see what they're doing. One hits record with a question on his mind. Two brothers pick it up, see what they find. Corn takes his time, Herman's got the facts. Back and forth, they never hold back. My weird prompts, come on in, that's where we begin. My weird prompts, glad you're here.
This episode was generated using artificial intelligence. Please verify facts.
You know, Corn, this whole show runs on GPU compute, and we wouldn't be here without Modal.
Seriously. And that's what powers all our text-to-speech. Everything you're hearing right now.
They're an AI infrastructure platform. Developers use them to run GPU workloads in the cloud with zero infrastructure headaches.
If you're building anything with AI, check them out. Modal.com. Imagine you are walking into a massive facility in Fort Meade. You've passed through 3 layers of perimeter fencing, your phone is locked in a lead-lined cubby at the gate, and your badge, which cost the taxpayer about $10,000 just to process the background check, is clipped to your belt. You'd expect to see rows of guys in trench coats or maybe some high-tech mission control center out of a Bond film, but you look around and what do you see? A Starbucks, a food court. People in hoodies complaining about the parking situation and debating whether the cafeteria's Taco Tuesday has gone downhill.
It is the ultimate paradox of the modern era, Corn. We are talking about the most secretive organizations on the planet, yet they are essentially massive corporate campuses. Today's prompt from Daniel is tapping into something I think a lot of people overlook, the sheer human scale and employment reality of the intelligence community. We always talk about the satellites and the exploits, but we rarely talk about the HR department or the recruitment pipelines that keep these engines running.
Well, Hannah specifically asked for more of this, so we are delivering. And by the way, today's episode of My Weird Prompts is powered by Google Gemini 3 Flash, which is fitting since we are talking about high-tech workforces. Herman, you've been digging into the numbers. When we talk about the NSA or GCHQ or Israel's Unit 8200, how big are we actually talking? Is this a tiny elite squad? Or are these agencies essentially the Google and Microsoft of the public sector?
It is much closer to the latter than people realize. If you look at the United States, the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, the ODNI released budget documents for 2025 that give us a pretty clear window. The NSA alone employs roughly 30,000 direct federal employees. Now, compare that to the total U.S. federal workforce, which is about 2.1 million people. So, the NSA by itself is about 1.4% of the entire federal civilian workforce.
1.4% just for one agency? That sounds high when you consider there are hundreds of federal agencies.
It is significant, but here is where it gets wild. That 30,000 number is just the green badgers, the direct government hires. If you factor in the gold badgers, the contractors, that number easily doubles or triples. Estimates from recent Government Accountability Office reports suggest that at places like the NSA, the contractor workforce makes up 50 to 60% of the total personnel on campus, when you aggregate all 18 agencies in the U.S. Intelligence community, the CIA, NGA, NRO, and the rest, you are looking at a workforce that represents closer to 3% of the total federal public sector.
So 1 out of every 30-odd federal employees is essentially a spook of some variety. That is a massive footprint. I mean, compare that to something like the Department of Labor or Education. These aren't just niches. These are major employment hubs.
They are, and it creates this fascinating company town dynamic. If you go to the area around Fort Meade in Maryland or Cheltenham in the UK where GCHQ is based, the entire local economy is structured around these agencies. We are talking about tens of thousands of people with high-level security clearances who all need houses, schools, and dry cleaning. It is a massive public sector middle class that exists entirely behind a curtain of classification.
I want to talk about that curtain because Daniel asked what it actually looks like inside. If I'm a developer and I'm used to the buzzy tech vibe, open plans, beanbags, free snacks, and I walk into GCHQ's Donut, building in Cheltenham or their new Manchester office, am I going to be depressed? Or have they caught up with the times?
It's a mix, but they are trying desperately to catch up. GCHQ's Manchester office is actually a great example of the new look for intelligence work. They moved into a space in the city center specifically to attract tech talent who didn't want to live in the suburbs of Cheltenham. If you walked in there, it looks like a high-end fintech startup. Open plan desks, collaborative zones, lots of glass and natural light. They even have public-facing recruiting videos now that show off these innovation hubs.
Wait, so they have recruiting videos showing the inside of the facility. Doesn't that defeat the purpose of it being a secret facility?
Well, they are very careful about what they show. You'll see the unclassified zones, the break rooms, the collaboration areas. You won't see the screens and the CIFs, the sensitive compartmented information facilities. But the shift is real. The NSA opened their Cybersecurity Collaboration Center recently, which is specifically designed to look and feel like a Silicon Valley office. They use agile methodologies, they have casual dress codes, no more suits unless you're meeting a member of Congress, and they try to foster that startup energy.
I've got to say, startup energy in a place where you can't bring your phone into the office sounds like a tough sell. I mean, how do these people live without being able to check their text for 8 hours?
That is actually one of the biggest culture shocks for new recruits. It is called going dark. You leave your life at the door. For Gen Z and younger millennials, that is a massive hurdle. Imagine being a 23-year-old developer used to having 5 tabs of Discord and Twitter open while you code, and suddenly you are in a windowless room because many of the older buildings are still windowless bunkers for tempest shielding, and you have zero connectivity to the outside world.
But how does that work in practice for someone with a family? If there's an emergency at home or your kid's school calls, how do they even reach you if your phone is in a locker half a mile away at the security gate?
It's actually quite archaic. You usually have a desk phone, a black line, for unclassified calls, and you give that number to your spouse or the school, but it means you're filtered. You aren't getting the TikTok your friend sent or the news alert about a celebrity death. You are in a bubble. People describe it as a strange form of mental relief once they get used to it, but the first few months are brutal. It's a literal dopamine detox every single workday.
It's basically a digital monastery. You go in, you pray to the gods of signals intelligence, and you come out 8 hours later to see what happened in the world. But that brings up the recruitment side. How do they actually get people to agree to that? The pay in the public sector is notoriously lower than big tech. If I'm a top-tier data scientist, I can make $300,000 at Google, or maybe $90,000 at the NSA. What is the hook?
The hook is the mission and the toys. That is how they frame it. They tell you you will see data and solve problems here that literally do not exist in the private sector. And for a certain type of nerd, and I say that with the utmost respect, that is intoxicating. You get to play with the world's most powerful supercomputers and see the raw feed of global events before they hit the news. Plus, there is the clearance as a career. Play.
Right, the golden ticket. Once you have a top-secret SCI clearance with a polygraph, you are part of an elite labor pool.
And the agencies know this. They know they are often a finishing school for the private sector. They take a smart kid out of college, pay for their master's degree, give them a clearance that costs the government $200,000 to maintain over a decade, and then that kid leaves after 5 years to work for a defense contractor making double the salary. It's a revolving door, but it's one the government actually subsidizes.
Let's look at the ultimate version of that finishing school model, Israel's Unit 8200. Daniel mentioned this as a case study, and it's probably the most famous example of an intelligence unit acting as a national economic engine. How does that workforce scale compared to the US or UK?
Unit 8200 is fascinating because it's part of the military, not a civilian agency like the CIA. It is the largest unit in the Israel Defense Forces. We are talking about a workforce that feeds roughly 10,000 veterans into the Israeli tech sector every single year.
10,000 a year? In a country of 9 million people?
Yes. Think about that scale. That is roughly 0.5% of the entire Israeli workforce being refreshed every single year with people who have spent 3 years at the absolute bleeding edge of cyber warfare and signals intelligence. It is a talent pipeline that is essentially a state-sponsored incubator. If you look at the founders of companies like Checkpoint, Palo Alto Networks, or Wiz, they almost all come out of 8200.
It's like Harvard, but instead of a crimson blazer, you get a submachine gun and a keyboard. But what is the culture like there? Is it that austere government vibe Daniel asked about, or is it different?
It's incredibly informal. In 8200, you might have a 19-year-old sergeant telling a 40-year-old colonel that his technical strategy is wrong. It is very flat, very hacker culture. They focus on results over protocol. That is why they are so successful at transitioning to the startup world. They've already been working in high-pressure, resource-constrained environments where innovation is the only way to survive.
It sounds like the anti-NSA in some ways. The NSA feels like a massive oil tanker, powerful but slow and bureaucratic. 8200 sounds like a fleet of jet skis.
That's a fair comparison, although the NSA is trying to build its own jet skis. But let's go back to the day in the life question Daniel had. What does the interview actually look like? If you apply to GCHQ today, you aren't meeting a guy in a dark alley. You are likely going through a process that feels very much like a corporate assessment center.
I've heard the polygraph is the real kicker. That is the one part Google doesn't do.
The poly is the great filter. For the NSA or CIA, it is a rite of passage. You are sitting in a room, wires attached to your chest, being asked if you've ever committed a crime or if you have secret allegiances to foreign powers. It is deeply intrusive and, honestly, quite stressful. It can take 12 to 18 months just to get through the vetting process. That is the biggest employment bottleneck they have. Imagine trying to hire a software engineer in 2026 and telling them, hey, we love your resume, we'll see you in a year and a half after we've talked to your high school gym teacher and checked your bank records from 10 years ago.
Most engineers would have 3 different jobs by the time the NSA calls back. How do they solve that?
They've started offering interim clearances. They'll bring you on to work on unclassified projects or low-side development while the deep background check is running. It's a way to get people in the door before they lose interest. And they are leaning heavily on talent marketplaces. The NSA launched a pilot program in 2025 that basically mimics a gig economy platform. If you are a cleared professional, you can browse internal projects and bid to spend 6 months working on a specific task force, then move back to your regular role. It's trying to give that sense of mobility you get in the private sector.
What about the physical space? Daniel asked if there are no photos on the walls. Is it really that sterile?
In the high security areas, yes. You generally cannot have personal electronics, no cameras, no smartwatches. In some facilities, you can't even have a Fitbit. The walls are often bare or decorated with mission posters. Think motivational posters, but instead of a cat on a branch, it says, security is a shared responsibility, or loose tweets sink fleets.
That sounds miserable. I need my desk toys, Herman. I need my bobbleheads and my pictures of the family.
You can usually have physical photos, just no digital ones. But the modern offices, like GCHQ Manchester or the new NGA campus in St. Louis, are trying to break that mold. They are putting in scolaboration zones. That's a terrible corporate word I just made up, where people can actually talk to each other. They realize that if you treat people like drones in a bunker, they leave.
Speaking of drones, let's talk about the contractor side of the workforce. You mentioned 50 to 60% of the NSA's headcount is contractors. That is a massive shadow workforce. Why does the government do that? Is it just about saving money?
It's actually often more expensive to use contractors, but it's flexible money. If Congress authorizes a certain number of full-time equivalents or FTEs, that number is hard to change. But contracting budget is easier to move around. Plus, it allows agencies to bring in specialized skills, like high-end AI researchers, without having to fit them into the rigid government pay scales. They can pay a contractor firm $500 an hour for a specialist, even if they could never pay a federal employee that much.
But that creates a 2-tier society on campus, doesn't it? The green badgers versus the gold badgers.
There is a real cultural divide. The green badgers have the job security and the official authority, but the gold badgers often have the newer tech skills and the higher paychecks. And then there's the security risk. Remember Edward Snowden? He was a contractor for Booz Allen Hamilton working at an NSA facility. When you outsource your workforce to that degree, you are essentially trusting private companies to do your vetting and culture building for you. A 2025 GAO report actually flagged this as a major oversight risk at the NSA. They were struggling to track exactly who had access to what across their contractor network.
It's the LinkedIn-ification of espionage. You have these people who move between Northrop Grumman, Raytheon, and the NSA every few years. Their loyalty is to their career path and their clearance level more than any single agency. It's a professionalized mercenary class of analysts.
It is, and it's global. Look at the UK. GCHQ has been very public about their Cyber First program. They are targeting kids as young as 11 with coding competitions. They are trying to build a brand as an employer of choice. They want to be seen as the cool part of the government. They even have a puzzle on their website that they use as a soft recruiting tool. If you can solve it, you get a link to their careers page.
That's very the imitation game. Very Alan Turing. But does it work? Do they actually get the cool kids? Or do they just get the kids who are really good at following rules?
That is the million-dollar question. The transparency paradox Daniel mentioned is real. They have to be transparent enough to recruit talent, but classified enough to do their jobs. If you look at the NSA's Instagram, yes, they have an Instagram. It's full of day in the life reels. They show people walking into the building, getting coffee, laughing in a meeting. It looks like a recruitment ad for a bank. They are trying to humanize the machine.
Come word for the NSA, we have oat milk in the break room. It's a far cry from the no such agency days when they wouldn't even admit they existed. But I wonder about the long-term impact of this scale. If 3% of the US federal workforce is in intelligence and 5% of the Israeli tech sector is coming out of 8,200, what does that do to the civilian side of the world?
It creates a securocrat class. You have a massive portion of the most talented technical minds in a country working on problems that are, by definition, adversarial. They aren't building better healthcare systems or more efficient energy grids. They are building better ways to break into things or stop people from breaking into things. In Israel, this has worked out as a massive economic boon because those breaking things skills are exactly what you need for cybersecurity startups. But in the US and UK, it's more complicated. You have this brain drain into the classified world.
I've always felt like the secret part of the job is half the appeal for some people. There is a certain ego boost to knowing things the rest of the world doesn't. You can't tell your wife what you did at work, but you can give her a look that says, I just saved the world, but it's a secret.
There is definitely a mission-driven dopamine hit, but there is also a mission-driven burnout. The pressure in these roles is immense. If you're an analyst at GCHQ and you miss a signal that leads to a terror attack, that is a weight you carry forever. It's not like a bug in a commercial app where the worst thing that happens is a server goes down. The stakes are human lives. That is why the office culture is shifting toward wellness and support. They realized they were losing people to burnout at a staggering rate.
How do they actually handle burnout in a classified environment? You can't exactly take your work home to a therapist, right?
That's the catch. You have to use vetted therapists who also have clearances. Most of these agencies now have internal mental health clinics. They've realized that if an employee is struggling, they can't just go to a community support group and vent about their stressful day, because their stressful day involved top secret intercepts. So the agency has to provide the entire support structure, from the gym to the psychologist inside the wire. It's a total institution.
So we've gone from windowless bunkers and shut up and work to open plan offices, Instagram reels, and mental health days. The intelligence community is basically becoming a very high-stakes version of WeWork.
Minus the we, maybe. It's still very much about I and need to know. But the scale is what's truly impressive. When Daniel asks if it's 0.1% or less, the answer is a resounding no. It is a massive structural part of the modern state. In the US, the National Intelligence Program budget for 2026 is expected to top $75 billion. That is a lot of salaries, Corn.
75 billion. That's a lot of Taco Tuesdays.
It's also a lot of specialized roles. We tend to think of spies and hackers, but the IC is one of the largest employers of linguists in the world. The NSA has people who specialize in obscure dialects that most people haven't even heard of. They have historians, librarians, even anthropologists. It is a full-spectrum society hidden inside the government.
I remember seeing something about the NSA's National Cryptologic Museum. It's open to the public, right there at Fort Meade. It's their one little window to the world.
It's a great museum, and it's part of that public-facing strategy. They want the public to see them as the guardians of the code, but the human side is still the most complex part. If you step inside GCHQ today, you'll see people from every walk of life. They have been very aggressive about diversity and inclusion lately, not just for the sake of it, but because cognitive diversity is a literal requirement for intelligence work. If everyone in the room thinks the same way, you have a massive blind spot.
But how do they balance that diversity with the rigid clearance rules? I mean, if you have family abroad or you traveled to sensitive countries, doesn't that automatically disqualify you?
It used to. It was a huge problem for recruiting first-generation immigrants who had the exact language skills the agencies needed. They've had to soften those rules. Now, instead of an automatic no, they do a mitigation strategy. They'll look at your foreign ties and decide if they can manage the risk. They've realized that if they only hire people whose families have lived in Kansas for 4 generations, they're going to be functionally illiterate in the languages of their adversaries.
We need more people who don't think like government drones. That's a hell of a recruiting slogan. Are you a weirdo? Come work for the people who watch the weirdos.
That is basically what 8200 does. They look for the kids who are outside the box. In Israel, they start tracking these kids in middle school. They see who is winning the math Olympiads and who is hacking their school's grading system. Instead of punishing them, they recruit them.
It's the Endeavor model. Find the outliers and give them a mission. But what about the austere side of things? Daniel asked about that. Is there still a place for the old school, gray-carpeted, fluorescent-lit government office?
Oh, absolutely. If you go to the older parts of the CIA's original headquarters building in Langley, the part built in the early 60s, it is very government issue. It feels like a high school from 1974. Concrete walls, heavy doors, that specific smell of old paper and industrial floor wax. There is a weird tension between the old guard who think that's the way it should be, and the new guard who want the coffee bar and the standing desks.
I bet the old guard hates the hoodies.
They definitely do. There have been actual internal debates at agencies about whether Casual Friday is a security risk because it makes people too relaxed and prone to talking. It sounds like a joke, but in a culture built on paranoia, everything is a potential vulnerability.
That's the transparency paradox again. You want to be approachable to hire the best, but you want to be unapproachable to stay secure. It's like a dating profile where all the photos are blurred out, but the bio says, "I'm a great guy, trust me."
And yet, it works. They still get thousands of applicants for every opening, because at the end of the day, there is only one place where you can legally do what they do. If you want to engage in offensive cyber operations or global signals collection, you either do it for the government or you do it for a criminal syndicate. And for most people, the government pension and the good guy badge are the better deal.
Let's talk about the future of this workforce. As AI, like the Gemini model writing this script, becomes more capable, do we need 30,000 people at the NSA? Can we replace 5,000 analysts with one really good LLM?
That is the clearance crunch I'm worried about. We are seeing a massive shift toward automation in the first pass analysis. Sorting through trillions of signals to find the one that matters is a task perfectly suited for AI. But the human in the loop becomes more important, not less. You need someone who understands the nuance, the culture, and the why behind the data. The workforce might not shrink, but it will change. You'll need fewer sorters and more interpreters.
Does that mean the hiring process gets even harder? If you need people who are both technical geniuses and deep cultural experts, that pool has to be tiny.
It is tiny. And that's why you see the agencies moving toward lateral entry. They are trying to lure mid-career professionals from companies like Amazon or Palantir for tours of duty. They'll say, "Give us 2 years of your time to help us build this specific AI architecture, and we'll give you the clearance and the experience of working on the most classified data sets on Earth." It's an attempt to break the old model where you join at 22 and stay until you're 65.
And that requires a different kind of brain. Not just someone who can code, but someone who can think critically about what the AI is telling them.
And that is where the recruitment battle will really heat up. The agencies are going to be competing with AI labs for the same talent. If you can make $700,000 at OpenAI or $85,000 at the CIA, that mission hook has to be incredibly strong.
Help us keep the AI from killing everyone is a pretty good hook, though.
It's the ultimate hook. But let's look at the actionable side of this for the listeners. If someone is listening and thinks, actually, that sounds like a fascinating career path, what is the reality?
Step 1. Delete your browser history.
Actually, step 1 is be patient. The process is the product. If you want to work in the IC, you have to be comfortable with the idea that your life will be scrutinized in a way that most people can't imagine. But the payoff is access to a world that most people only see in movies. And as Daniel's prompt points out, it is a significant part of our public sector. It's not just a shadow world, it's a massive employment engine.
I think the biggest takeaway for me is the scale. The fact that we are talking about millions of people globally when you factor in all the nations with serious intelligence arms, China, Russia, the EU states, the Five Eyes. This is a silent industry. That is probably one of the largest technical employers on Earth.
It absolutely is. And it's an industry that is increasingly normalizing. The shift toward open plan offices and Manchester tech hubs is a sign that the secret world is having to compete in the real world for the most valuable resource there is, human talent.
It's funny to think about. Somewhere out there, right now, a 24-year-old is sitting in a windowless room at Fort Meade, drinking a lukewarm latte, and looking at a screen that tells him exactly what a foreign leader had for breakfast. And then he's going to go home, sit in traffic, and wonder if he should have taken that job at a crypto startup instead.
And he'll probably decide he's exactly where he needs to be. Because at the end of the day, the crypto startup won't let him play with a spy satellite.
Fair point. The toys always win. Well, this has been a deep dive into the human side of the machine. I hope Hannah got the career-focused IC content she was looking for. It certainly paints a different picture than the movies.
Much more mundane and yet, in some ways, much more impressive. The sheer logistical effort of keeping that many people cleared and focused is a feat in itself.
Think about the IT department for a place like the NSA. You can't just call Geek Squad if your monitor breaks. Every single piece of hardware has to be inspected for implants. Every mouse and keyboard has to be Tempest certified so it doesn't leak electromagnetic signals. The office manager role at a place like that must be a nightmare.
It's a specialized field called Technical Surveillance Countermeasures, or TSCM. They are the ones who sweep the rooms for bugs and make sure the coffee machine isn't secretly broadcasting the meeting to a van in the parking lot. Even the janitors need high-level clearances. You can't just hire a local cleaning crew to empty the trash in a room where the floor is covered in classified documents.
That's a fun fact. The most overqualified janitors in the world work at Langley. They probably have better benefits than most middle managers in the private sector.
They have to. You can't risk them being bribed. Every single person in that building, from the director to the person stocking the vending machines, is a potential point of failure. That is the true scale of the employment reality Daniel was asking about. It's an entire ecosystem of trust.
Definitely. Well, we've covered the numbers, the culture, and the donut in Cheltenham. I think we've done Daniel's prompt justice.
For now, at least. Until the next budget document drops and we see those headcount numbers climb even higher.
Every time a new AI model comes out, the NSA probably adds another 1,000 AI safety roles to their job board. It's a growth industry for sure.
It's the one part of the government that never seems to shrink.
Truth. Well, that's our look at the intelligence workforce. Thanks for the prompt, Daniel, and thanks for the request, Hannah. It's always fun to peek behind the curtain, even if the curtain is made of lead-lined concrete.
And thanks as always to our producer, Hilbert Flumingtop, for keeping the gears turning on this operation.
A big thanks to Modal as well for providing the GPU credits that keep our AI-powered scripts flowing. This has been My Weird Prompts.
If you're enjoying these deep dives, we'd love it if you could leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. It's the best way to help other people find the show.
Or just tell your friends. Unless you work for the NSA, in which case, don't tell anyone anything.
Good advice. We'll see you next time.
Catch you later. This episode was produced using Google Gemini 3 Flash. Text-to-speech by Chatterbox.
Thanks for listening to our show, My Weird Prompts, where our thoughts go from slow takes to facts on cue. We change and follow through. My weird prompts.